would divide the civil rights into 3 parts, and we'll do the 1950s, the 1960s to 1965, and then 1965 on. So to start the civil rights movement, there's a couple things that were important from post-World War II. There's going to be a renewed push for civil rights. Remember, Jackie Robinson is going to be the first African-American to play Major League Baseball. And then Truman is going to support civil rights by desegregating the U.S. Army with Executive Order 9981, desegregating federal buildings, and ending discrimination in housing. And remember, because of his stance on desegregation, he's going to cause a sort of a split in the Democratic Party. They actually run as a separate party, but remember the southern states, the Dixiecrats, are going to run Strom Thurmond. I think he was the governor of South Carolina, and Truman's going to lose some electoral votes in the southern states due to this party because of his stance on desegregation. I forgot to put that up there, sorry. So, the first major decision that's going to happen is going to happen after the NAACP in 1953 with lawyer Thurgood Marshall is going to challenge segregation of public schools in the case of the family of Linda Brown versus Topeka, Kansas. And in 54, Chief Justice Earl Warren is going to rule in the case of Brown versus the Board of Education, which rules that segregation of black students in public schools violates the civil rights granted by the 14th Amendment. Remember that the 13th freed from slavery, 14th civil rights, 15 voting rights. So the ruling means it's separate but equal, which reverses Plessy versus Ferguson, and public schools K through 12 is unconstitutional, and that the Warren is going to order that all public schools be desegregated with all deliberate speed. Now, as we know, that's not going to happen with all deliberate speed, but that's the order. And that's Chief Justice Earl Warren. Okay, the next major event in the civil rights movement is going to come in December of 55, so about a year and a half later, when members of the black community in Montgomery, Alabama are going to launch a boycott of the Montgomery bus system, and they're trying to use economic pressure to get better treatment for their black passengers. And there's again these segregation laws in Montgomery concerning bus passengers, and they want to end them. So this is where Rosa Parks goes onto the bus and refuses to give up her seat, and it's going to be led by Martin Luther King, who's the pastor of the Dexter Street Baptist Church, and it's ultimately going to be successful, even though the city of Montgomery steps in with legal action, and there are some violent actions by the KKK. And there's Rosa Parks. She gets arrested, and there's Martin Luther King Jr. Now, it's going to be extremely important in the civil rights movement for several reasons. And by the way, here's some more pictures. I don't think I mentioned this in class if you're re-watching this, but or I didn't emphasize it enough. It really is, economic pressure is a big deal because, again, like the little video that we watched about the sit-ins, the Woolworth lunch counter, you know, the African Americans are a huge part of the economy, and the people, they were allowing them to eat and buy stuff at the store, but then not letting them sit at the lunch counter. So again, these are people that are paying to ride the bus. So if they don't ride the bus system loses money. Now, results are going to be the Supreme Court is going to rule again, using the 14th Amendment, that these policies violate the 14th Amendment, and this is going to put Martin Luther King in the national spotlight as a civil rights leader, and this is where the nonviolent civil disobedient protest becomes an effective tool. Of course, Gandhi uses it in India, but it comes from Henry David Thoreau in his essay, I believe, which is called Civil Disobedience. So, we're going back to the Brown versus Board of Education, and a lot of these southern states aren't going to integrate. So in 57, Governor Orville Favis of Arkansas is going to use the National Guard to prevent non-black students from integrating Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. And in order to enforce this decision, Eisenhower is actually going to order federal marshals to come in with 1,000 federal soldiers and force them to desegregate this high school and make sure that these non-students are allowed to attend. And here is pictures of the event. And these students are known as the Arkansas Nine or the Little Rock Nine. And by 1960, only 765 out of 6,665 southern school districts had desegregated. So remember, with all deliberate speed is really very slow. And I talked about my personal experience and how long it took East Baton Rouge Parish to completely desegregate. Okay, so the 1950s, there's going to be 4 major results of the civil rights movement of the 50s. National attention to the civil rights movement, the TV. We've talked about how important the TV is, the Vietnam War protests, making a common culture, making what do people think the ideal family is. But by the end of the 1950s, the civil rights movement is going to be on TV. Separate but equal ends in public schools. Martin Luther King is going to become a national civil rights leader. And the most important thing is that they're going to adopt this strategy of nonviolent civil disobedient protest to achieve its goals, which is going to tie into the whole media and TV component of it, because people are going to see that they are not being violent in any way, shape, or form. And I think this is a good thing. I didn't read it in class, but it's by Chief Justice Earl Warren. We come then to the question presented: does segregation of children in public schools solely on the basis of race, even though the physical facilities and other tangible factors may be equal, deprive the children of the minority group of equal educational opportunities? We believe that it does. We conclude that in the field of public education, the doctrine of separate but equal has no place. Separate educational facilities are inherently unequal. Therefore, we hold that the plaintiffs and others similarly situated for whom the actions have been brought are, by reason of the segregation, I got interrupted. Therefore, we hold that the plaintiffs and others similarly situated for whom the actions have been brought are, by reason of the segregation complained of, deprived of the equal protection of the laws guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. And I think one other thing that I didn't stress is that, again, there really wasn't separate but equal. It was separate, and it was really unequal, because a lot of times the African American schools were not as nice as the white schools. And that is going to be the end of part 1 of the Civil Rights Movement.